All right, welcome back. Your time right now is 8:45, and just as pennies are becoming a thing of the past, paper checks could actually be headed in that same direction. The Federal Reserve is considering a move away from checks, and as their role in the financial system evolves, we have a local banking expert here that's warning that they continue to pose a significant fraud risk. So here to talk more about that and share some practical tips that people can take to protect themselves is Tamara Reed with Triad Bank. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Of course. We just talked over 40 years in banking, so you are an expert at this point, right?
40 years, yes.
That's awesome. Well, first off, as we just mentioned, the Fed is considering moving away from paper checks. What's your take on this? Do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I will tell you that in my many years of banking, I have definitely seen customers move away from writing checks. A lot of them are adopting the electronic payment systems, instant payment methods, but checks are still written today. And as we've mentioned, they do pose a fraud risk. Anytime you're issuing checks, you're putting information out there that's very sensitive, and criminals are looking for that information. So as long as they're out there, it's gonna pose a fraud risk. So if Fed can do away with that, that would be beneficial for banks, for businesses, for individuals. So it's not a bad idea, and we're already heading in that direction anyway.
The only place right now in my recent years I've ever had to write a check is at the DMV because I don't want to pay the upcharge to use a credit or debit card.
There you go.
And I'm of that generation where I have to look up to make sure I'm even writing the check right. So a lot of people still use checks though to even pay bills and stuff. So why do they continue to create a fraud risk if this is something so many people use?
Well, because of the sensitive information that a check contains. For example, if say for example one of your checks was sitting here in front of us, Mercedes, I would literally be able to see how the account is established. I would see where you're banking. I would see your account number, your check number series. I could get all of that information off of there, and if I were a criminal, I could then duplicate that to make a check payable to myself and maybe 20 of my best friends. And so once you put those checks out there, that information, it's very sensitive, and that's what criminals are looking for.
Well, and how do paper checks fit into the broader scams that you see affecting local businesses right now?
Well, again, broader scams, you see a lot of fraud, or a lot of theft, individuals stealing out of mailboxes. There was a criminal ring that was caught stealing out of the blue boxes at the post office. You always thought, right, whenever you would take a check to the post office, it was safe.
Right.
But when you have criminal rings that have figured out how to break into those boxes, you're at risk. Whether you're putting in your mailbox, you're going to the post office. Last year I had a client that told me they would call the police once a week because they would see people driving around checking mailboxes.
Oh my gosh.
And looking for checks.
So on that note, who is this affecting the most? Is it small companies, large companies? What are you seeing personally?
Personally, there was a time when it was large companies, because they wrote a lot of checks to a lot of different individuals and they were more at risk. Unfortunately, in the last several years, it doesn't matter.
Wow.
It's big companies, small companies, individuals, everyone is at risk.
And if someone at home right now is consistently using checks, what's your advice to them? What should they do if they're listening to this and now they're like, oh no?
Well, one of the things I would say is if you're still writing a check, reach out to vendors that you have to pay, you have to write a check to, and ask if they accept a payment in another way, another format, a more secure format. Again, electronically, instant payment. What else can they do so they don't have to write a check? If they absolutely have to, make sure that they're protecting their information. Know how it's going to get from point A to point B, and that you're making sure that that process is secure.
So many places now don't even take paper checks anymore, right?
That's true.
There's sometimes at the grocery store where you'll be behind that one person writing a check. So again, it is kind of the sign of the time. So what protections can actually catch a fraudulent check before funds leave the account?
Well, for a business at Triad, we highly recommend that our customers use a system called Positive Pay. It's a fraud prevention service where the business will submit a list of the checks that they're issuing. That list is going to include obviously the account number, the check number, the dollar amount, the payee name, and whenever that check clears the bank, we are matching that up to make sure that that is clearing the account and it's exactly how the customer issued it. If there's anything that's different than how they've issued it, they get an exception notification and they can review that and determine if that check should be paid or not. There's also ACH positive pay. It's where if an electronic debit is posting to their account, they can also get notification. And it works, a couple of different ways it works, but they also can get notification to verify that that is a legitimate transaction. For individuals, Mercedes, I highly recommend looking at your online banking system. What alerts can you take advantage of to be notified if a debit is posting to your account so that you can make sure that that is a legitimate transaction that's coming through?
Thank you so much. These were really great tips and something I think a lot of people need to be thinking about constantly.
Yeah, they do.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mercedes.
Yes, thank
you. Very much.
you.